Do you have a dream? It could be to step into a leadership position, or to launch a new project, or start your own business, or do something creative. But when we have a dream, we have to take action. And how often do we want something, but we don't take action? We're paralyzed, we procrastinate, we have fear, we feel like we're not good enough, or we don't know how, or we don't have enough money or resources to achieve whatever that dream is. I have a friend, he's so good at what he does, but he spent his whole life complaining and yearning that he wants to be a leading man on Broadway, and yet he never goes to an audition or create his own show. Or how many of us have a friend that say they want to be in a relationship, but they don't go out on a date? To achieve something, we have to take action. And to take action, we have to take a risk. And that's pretty scary, because sometimes we think we're going to fail. But we feel so much better when we step into our light. Now, when I graduated NYU, I had this wonderful acting teacher at Carnegie Hall. His name was Freddie Karaman. And he was this silver-haired Grouch with a twinkle in his eye. And he'd come over to me and he'd say, "Quinny, Quinny." And he'd reach into his pocket and he'd pull out an acorn. And he'd say, "Quinny, what is this?" And I'm like, "Freddie, that's an acorn." And he's like, "No, this is not an acorn. This is an oak tree. In this acorn, it has all of the DNA of the entire oak tree. It's perfect. But you have to plant it, you have to water it, you have to nurture it, you have to put a little manure on it, and believe. Believe that it is going to grow into a magnificent oak tree. We don't know how or what it's going to look like, but we have to trust and believe. You could have this much talent or this much talent, but if you don't plant your seeds, they're never going to grow. It's just like our dreams. And so we have to step out of ourselves and risk and take action. I came out of the womb singing, but my mom was determined that I was going to be an opera singer. And so I was studying voice lessons in Indiana, and she came to me at 15 and said, "I got a Rotary scholarship to study enology, wine, in Bordeaux, France. Do you want to stay in Columbus, Indiana with your dad for a year, or do you want to go to France?" Now, I was terrified because I didn't want to leave my friends. I wanted to stay in school. But I knew I had an allurement that if I went to France, my life was going to change. But I didn't speak French or anything, and she put me in a French school. But I was the best person in my English class. I was better than everybody else. But it was magical. It was uncomfortable. But every day it was like a wall was coming down, and I was able to communicate better and better. And every day we'd have lunch at our apartment. It was a 2-hour lunch, and our apartment was across the Parc Bordelaise. And underneath our apartment was the best pâtisserie in all of Bordeaux. Oh my gosh. The smells of pain au chocolat, chocolate eclairs, tarte tatin came wafting up into our apartment. I was in heaven. And every day, I had to try what the latest pastry was. And my mom and I really bonded over food and wine all over Europe. And about 10 months later, before we were supposed to go back to the United States, I looked at myself in the mirror, and I realized all those pastries and wine went to my waistline. And I was a vain teenager, and I wasn't going to go back to Indiana like that. And I became obsessed. Anything I'd eat, I'd go running around the park. And we went back to the United States, and my obsession continued. I'd look at myself in the mirror, and I don't know who was looking back at me. And then one day, I walked up the stairs to go to the ballet, and I collapsed. I came to, but I couldn't even lift myself up. I'd gotten down to 89 pounds. I'd starved myself to death. My hemoglobin was 2, and my mom took me to the hospital, and they wanted to give me a blood transfusion. But this was the 80s, and this was the height of the AIDS epidemic. And my mom turned to me and she said, "You have a choice. Do you want to live?" And it was at that moment that I realized I was going to not have the blood transfusion, and I was going to heal myself with food. And I sat in that hospital for 6 weeks, and I healed myself back to health. I also realized that I was living my mom's dreams. I had spent my whole life trying to please her, and I didn't know what my dreams were. How many times have you lived somebody else's dream? Sometimes we follow a path and we're living our parents' or our spouses' or our children or our coworkers or our boss's dreams, but we're not being authentically ourselves. And when we make the decisions who we really are, whether it's a brand or whether it's as a person or a community, only then can we be authentic. And it was also at that moment that I realized I love Broadway and pop and jazz, and I was not going to go back to France and be an opera singer. I was going to come to New York City and study musical theater, and I was going to change my life forever following my dreams. And it has given me opportunities to perform on wonderful stages all over the world. Disruption means change, and we have to take change. It's scary, and we have to risk for change. But when your body tells you that you want something, you have to take steps to get it. I have some acorn charms that I want to give all of you, and I want you to say yes to opportunity. Say yes when you're asked to do something that you know is going to change your life. And just look at your acorn whenever you have doubts and know that only you can say yes to success, but you have to plant it like that acorn, and you have to water it and nurture it and trust that it is going to grow into a magnificent oak tree that only you can grow.